Hey everyone, thank you for joining another episode of Conversations with Bridget. I am joined today by Scott Rogerson, the CEO of UpContent. Scott, would you like to tell people a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, first of all, thanks, Bridget, for having me. I'm excited for the conversation. As you mentioned, CEO, also founder of a B2B SaaS technology called UpContent that focuses on content curation. Uh, Prior to that, I ran a marketing agency. Prior to that, private equity, was an internal auditor before that. So quite a varied random walk to get here. So it's been an exciting experience and looking forward to digging in a little bit more on content itself and how best to utilize content for your organization.
Yeah. I'm a writer. I do social media for a living. I'm constantly curating content and focusing on those relationships and that kind of, I would say, je ne sais quoi of marketing, but we do know what it is. It's reciprocity. You
Yes.
scratch on my back, I scratch at yours. So, some people like to say content isn't king, your website's king, whatever. Content's important.
Yes.
So, how do you view content on a business's website? What role
Yeah.
do you view that as?
Yeah. I think the first piece is when we talk about curated content between you and I all the time. I think a lot of individuals may still not exactly know where to place that phrase, right? Of what that actually means, of how to best use that. And what this doesn't mean sometimes tends to be easier to explain than what it does mean. So this does not mean go grabbing the RSS feed of your favorite publication and downloading a widget and plopping that feed in there and then having every article that they publish now feed into a list on your page. Not going to do you a whole heck of a lot of good for a variety of reasons that we could spend hours talking about. Uh, I think for us and our view and what we've seen be most successful when doing marketing directly for our customers, many of which were small businesses, as well as how we've grown up content, is that all content's not created equal and all content doesn't have the exact same purpose. And
Right.
so we really align with the hero hub hygiene content model. And hero content is that article that you definitely should own, right? That's not something that you've curated. That's the piece that when someone comes to your site, if they read that article, they get it. They know exactly who you are, what you're all about, what you're trying to do, who you like to work with. It's that piece you don't have to really change that often because that's who you are. And then the hub content are those related pillar pieces, right? And here's what we think about this specific area. There's probably not 20 of those. There's probably 2 or 5. So things that you're addressing on, not never updating, but monthly, quarterly, tweaking those things. And then there is the hygiene content. And that's where we start to see the translation from those other 2 layers, which we would view, given your accounting background as well, as CapEx, right? Those are your assets. Those are the things that you've invested time in and you expect to see a return over a long period of time. The hygiene articles are the things that just keep you relevant, keep giving context, keep making sure people know you're alive and you know what you're talking about, you're smart, and you have an understanding of what's happening in the world. That's where we see those more as the operating expense. You can put those articles up there. They're going to live there for a while. Don't really care what happens to them next month. And that's really where we see curated content best fitting in, which is going out and finding those articles that other authoritative publications have talked about that align with your view or are in contrast with your view. And you can bring those to your audience to say, don't just take my word for it. Here are some thoughts from others that I'm providing to you as a service, even though you're not paying me as a customer yet, to help you make the best decision of what service or what product or whom you should work with. And just remember that I'm always here to support you in making good choices, right? And that's really how we want curated content to best fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't a, wow, if I can curate stuff, I don't need to go and write things anymore. Or
Right.
I've got a ton of great writers and I'm an awesome writer. I was poet laureate in my high school, and therefore I don't need to curate content anymore. They always work better together.
Yeah, curation is way more than the RSS feed. And I see this a lot as I'm on Twitter looking at what gets spit out. A lot of people use that on Twitter. Is they'll just hook an RSS feed through Zapier into Buffer or
Yep.
Zapier because it makes you happier.
There it
And
is.
I know I always say Zapier. I can't help it, but they had to make their tagline a pronunciation guide. So there you
Yes.
go. But the problem can be with if you're not good at curating, if you're not curating in a way that's, well, the RSS feed doesn't allow you to curate because
Right.
it is a dump. So
Right.
you could be for this position X, and then they write about your competitor.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
you're tweeting that out, right?
Right.
Or so that's one of the things I like. I mean, we have a mutual client and they use UpContent. So I use UpContent. And I like the way that I can look at something and go, no, I don't want this BBC article because we're targeting Americans,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I'm not interested in that from Toronto, right?
Mhm.
And I can needle down to, I really don't want BBC.com in this, you know,
Right.
even though I like I'm in my own rabbit hole as I'm choosing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So I can
Exactly.
pick things that fit the demographic and, more importantly, our business goals.
Yes. And I think that is the important piece of really using curation as a service to your audience, right? The goal is to help them do something, not just make your life easier as a brand of not having to do things. And
Right.
so, you know, Buffer and Zapier are great partners of us at UpContent. You know, I mentioned background of mine's in economics, so comparative advantage is always the thing that our team thinks about. And what really that boils down to is what are the things that humans are best at doing? And it's exactly what you talked about, Bridget, of when you are presented with an array of articles, all of which match what you're interested in, but no one's going to be able to pick as a robot the exact 4 or 6 that you would have picked, because it's very difficult to translate all of the processes in your mind into picking the best ones. Could we pick ones that pass and are decent? Yeah. But really where your value is coming in curation is overlaying the brand and the perspective and the viewpoint on the content that matches those criteria. And then let automation and systems discover the content for you, organize it, and other systems distribute that and schedule it so that you can spend more time picking the best stuff. And most importantly, overlaying your own perspective on that content as well to help me understand as an external audience member, why'd Bridget pick that? Or why'd that client pick that? Oh, that helps me understand more about where they're coming from, what they're all about, and who they're trying to help.
Right. Right. And it's just like the same reason why I don't like the retweet button. Like you're just seeing something. I don't know why it is. I explain it to my small business clients when I'm teaching social media. It's like, if I show you, Scott, a picture of my dog on my phone, and then you just keep handing my phone around the room, pretty soon it's going to land to somebody who's like, who the hell's dog is this?
Yeah,
And why do I
right.
have their phone? It's
Yes.
not relevant to them.
Yes.
They
Yes.
lost the reason. Like, what was the reason I showed you this? Because this was my best friend. He died 2 years ago. And that's why you're at this party, because it's all about Sully. Well, that's totally different.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And, you know, a lot of people overuse the curation and they draw the line to the museum, but I still think that's a good analogy, right? You don't walk into like a natural history museum and just see like a big pile of bones in a big room, right? No, they took those bones and they put them together into dinosaurs, and then they put the dinosaurs together in the area that they would have lived, and they show how the dinosaurs interact. So I'm not just seeing piles of bones and I'm then having to do all the work of trying to figure out why they're here. The curator in that museum is putting together that story, providing that context, and helping me so that when I stare at those bones in that structure, I'm learning something new and being able to reflect on things that I already know.
Right.
And it really is no different when you're curating articles to your digital channels. It should be the same. That email newsletter that has the content in it, the fact that you selected those 6 this week needs to tell me something more about you and the brand. Not only that you're giving me a service, but that I'm learning more about you in that context. The fact that you're sharing that article versus the BBC article also tells me something, right? And hopefully it's an article that I either saw but didn't read, and now I'm more likely to read it because you shared it as well. Or I didn't see that article, and now I'm going to definitely keep checking your brand out or your profile out because you're always giving me stuff that I've missed and I
Right.
love it. Right. And so that also means that when you do share an original piece, you've now stimulated that audience and they understand the context. Not only have you grown it, but you've grown it with a purpose and helped to self-select the right people into your audience so they can then interact with your original content and obviously move down that journey to become customers of yours.
Right. And one of the things I appreciate about UpContent, not to be an infomercial, but I mean, I understand curation deeply because this is literally what I do for a living. It pays the rent. But I get the museum thing too, because if I'm going to the Sea Turtle Inc. to see like they have this thing, like how big are the turtles? And you can stand next to it and you know if you're bigger than a Kemp Ridley, right? And
Yeah.
that gives you context, which helps you
Yes.
care about that specific species more. And then you
Yes.
walk through this tunnel of plastic, you know, it's a net with plastic in it. And they explain to you why the straws are a big deal.
Oh,
Because
that's
people are like,
interesting.
who's
Yeah.
eating straws? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they're like, well, their throats have like these sticker things in them, right? And
Yeah.
so what happens is when they swallow something, because they have those stickers, it expands almost like a monkey's hand in a cookie jar. You know
Yeah.
that analogy? They
Yeah.
can't regurgitate it.
Mm.
That's why it's a
But see,
problem.
that's a
And
good
so you
example
walk
though.
through that curated exhibit,
Yes.
and then you have an experience that changes your perspective.
And I
That's the
think that's
power
the
of
other piece,
content.
right? Is that if you would have said to me in that conversation, hey, let me tell you all about why sea turtles have trouble with straws. And I'd be like, I know you already, so I'm going to innately trust what you're telling me. But if I just met you on the street for the first time and you're like, hey, let me tell you how, and you'd be like, I don't know where the context is. Where is this coming from? Who is this person? Does she have any credibility for knowing about sea turtles? But if you say, as you prefaced it, I went to this museum authority and I experienced this firsthand of how this is happening from this museum. Now I've made the line and I'm more likely to pay attention and listen and actually remember and then share it along as well. And it's the same exact process of why you can't just pretend that everything you know in your original content somehow just was bestowed upon you from above, but you instead actually learned it through what you've been reading. And by not only including those links in your original content, but also sharing the other things that were left on the cutting room floor that you didn't include in that original piece also helps to provide greater content and context and can drive more traffic back to your original pieces of, hey, if you like this article that I shared from Forbes or wherever, come see what my perspective is. And that's
Yeah.
this original piece now as well. So they all tie together. It's not one versus the other. And those original versus curated, those articles drive me bananas because it just doesn't make any sense at all to even try to have that discussion
Yeah,
about.
because it's not one or the other.
Yes.
And you know, I always joke around because I'm always going to go for the laugh. I'm like, you're my competitor. You're not.
Right.
Because we partner together, right? And so I'm kind of wondering, like, what would you tell a small business? See, okay, let me go backwards. Let me give you some more context. So a lot of my customers are website developers in WordPress, and
Yeah.
their clients will want these themes that
Yeah.
really the only way for those themes to work is if they have a lot of content, but they've written exactly zero.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Right.
So what would you say to the WordPress developer? Like, how is UpContent a good solution for them building websites for their clients?
Yeah. And so we do work with a lot of developers who will leverage a tool like UpContent to help translate project work into retainer work, right? Because it is more of an ongoing support process. And that does not mean, there's always these continuums, right? So you can set up a fully automated version of UpContent. Is it as good as bringing in Bridget to help you curate and select the right pieces? No, but is it better than actually having a site whose last article is from 2018? Yes,
Yes.
right? So there are stages of benefit that you can realize. And so we do work with many of these developers in concert with that client is, okay, we know that you're not going to be able to populate this entire site. We know you love the theme, but you're never going to fill this all out. Let's all be honest with each other. You don't have the budget to do it, and you probably shouldn't, because let's also be honest, you don't have that many unique things to talk about, right? I mean, there's just not a lot there. You have a few great hubs, and you have a hygiene piece or a hero piece, but you don't have any hygiene pieces. So through this individual whom you luckily grabbed as your web developer, they can also offer this solution to help you make sure that these other areas are populated and drive more traffic back to your original content pieces. And no, you're not bringing the full text of that article onto your site, because that's illegal. No one likes it, including your customers and crawlers. But you are getting engagement if the developer, which we would work with them on, can implement it properly, that those clicks on those third-party articles do lower your bounce rate, increase your engagement rate. It is in a JavaScript implementation that is being read by the crawlers.
Okay,
And
I was
probably
gonna
most
ask that.
importantly, yes, and most importantly, those outbound links, if they're contextually relevant to your content, are also looked upon positively by the crawlers. So being able to bring that solution and say, look, we know you're probably only going to be able to write one good piece a month or one good piece every 2 months, that's fine. And it's far better than writing 5 crappy pieces every month that are totally meaningless, superfluous, and that people are going to have a 90% bounce rate once they get to, because it tells them absolutely nothing. And so that would be how we tend to work with those developer resources, to help them assist their customers in creating the deeper, valuable pieces, supporting it with curated articles that can then continue to drive more traffic and turn those pieces into assets. Therefore, they're willing to pay more for those original pieces. It's not saying less work for writers. It's giving those great writers the work that they actually want to do, right? As pieces of merit, pieces of value. And then utilizing other great works that have been created by other publishers to help support that work. So that, a very long answer to a short question, but that would be how we best want to work with those web development groups, who then can be part of that support and longer term maintenance function, versus I'd like Stan to go build me a website. Great, you're done, Stan. I'll see you later, right? And then the site just atrophies, and no one's proud of it then on month 3, right?
Right. If it even looks the same. So
Exactly.
just going back a little bit, so you said that this is JavaScript based. So is that considered an event in Google Analytics?
So you can track it as an event. We even have some customers who will overlay AdSense on the sections and have the 4th card be an ad for AdSense. And you can just use the AdSense UI and click on one, and that will become your ad. But it was important to us that this is part of then the DOM of the site. So when the JavaScript renders, the crawler can read all the way through. The headlines are H3 tags. The summary text that you can update are P tags. It is mobile responsive. We have made it accessible for screen readers in a way that's not annoying, where you're not reading, image, alt text, all the way through. It'll actually skip the images and read the text of the article that's available. So that's all been very important to us, to make sure it is accessible, it is responsive, and it does help from an SEO perspective, unlike maybe some other solutions that developers may have used in the past that are iframing the content into their site. And therefore, you're not getting some of those benefits that we talked about from an SEO perspective.
Or accessibility.
Or accessibility, right? It's just a big blank window then that we skip over. So,
and that's not a good experience.
No, and then you get the even worse of the double, triple scroll bar issue, right? Where you get to the site and why can't I move down the page? Well, it's because you're in this iframe, and that's why, and then I have to move out. And we've all been there.
Yeah,
it's an awful experience.
Every single map on a website.
Yes, exactly.
It's
exactly.
So annoying.
Yes. How do I leave?
Well, or how do I get back to where I was?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that you also have a Shutterstock integration.
Yes.
So if the imagery doesn't, if the imagery, what I like about that is we can choose imagery that's consistent with our branding. If we're all line art, we can choose line art. If we're all photography, we can choose photography.
Yes, exactly. And I know that we all have had experience with imaging solutions in the past. Creative Commons or Unsplash or other tools as well that provide the royalty-free images, which obviously we all love to have access to. If you're going to do royalty-free correctly, you obviously need to include image credits and all those other things to make sure that it's there and proper. Otherwise, it can become an issue. And we heard that loud and clear from many of our customers, small businesses, large businesses, everyone in between. And that was the reason for partnering with Shutterstock, is that when you make those updates, you're receiving the license to use that image for commercial use, and you can modify that. And it's just part of your subscription with us rather than having to have a separate account. So just gives peace of mind. So as I mentioned, my background was in audit, so I'm fairly risk averse, and I don't want to pass along any of that risk to customers who, we've been there on the agency side where we thought we used an image and it was royalty free at the time. And then a month later, we get an email saying this artist removed that royalty free license and now you have to pay, or you have to take all these images down. It's a terrible customer conversation to have with a client of, hey, that image that we used, we need to remove that. And they're like, what? Right? So we want to avoid any of that challenge.
Yeah. I mean, we're just trying to do business.
Yeah.
And educate our client base.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so what would you say? Like, to me, it seems clear that it's not necessarily better, but for supplementing your website and providing content in your email newsletter, we're with my client that's also your client, we're integrating with MailChimp, and that's perfectly fine.
Yep.
What would you say about the cost factor? Because I know there's no way they could afford for me and my team of writers to write all those articles.
Yep.
And
exactly.
also, we wouldn't want to. But
right.
I mean, it's like, what would you say to people who are like, what? It's X amount a month?
Yeah. I think it does. You'll see the price, and our most common, we'll put it out there, right? Our most common package is $95 US a month, right? That's it. So, and that's mostly used by small businesses. Initially, right, if you're used to free things or things that have two digits that start with a 1 or maybe only 1 digit, 95 does seem like a good bit. But you do need to kind of take a step back, I think, and think about the time that you're investing. And in many cases, it's not just about time savings, because as a small business, we all have way too many things to do. It's not that we've spent 20 hours doing it and now we only need to spend 2. It's that we weren't doing it at all.
Right.
And now we have the opportunity to do it. Right. So the fact that you can utilize those articles on social, in your email campaigns, MailChimp's a great partner, other partners as well, and on your website. And as you know, overlay a call to action as well to drive more traffic back to your site, keep people on your site longer, and measure everything in between. As long as you can afford, $95 a month and 20 minutes of time, right? Otherwise, we hear customers who do have the time to spend are spending 8 hours a week trying to figure all this stuff out manually. So think about your own time. And I think for small businesses, and I've certainly been there as well, you have a hard time factoring in how much your time is worth, right? So you just think, well, if I can do it myself, then it's free. But that's not the case.
Not just how much your time is worth, but how much your time costs you as a business.
Yes.
And I have a job costing background. That's where my accounting is. So I feel like you should be doing things that you can bill at $175 an hour, not $20 an hour.
Right.
Or $50 an hour.
That's right. And that goes back to the comparative advantage conversation, right? If there's someone or some tool that can do it just as well, let's not even say better, just as well for far less of the cost, then I should always select that tool. And then I can focus my time on the things that nothing can replace or that I can do even better than anything else could do.
Right.
And that's the mental calculus that I think we all innately go through, but too often we get into this trap of, I can't spend that extra $30. I'm just going to spend an extra 2 hours at night and not be with my family or not be with friends or not go out to dinner, right? And that doesn't make any sense. So
I mean, because time is not renewable resource.
Not free. Yeah, exactly. So that would be the conversation that we would have. And it has, we have those conversations daily with customers about how do we think about this? How can we measure success? What's the ROI? Those are great conversations. We love having them. It's not something we run away from. But we did try to price everything in a way that makes it approachable and that allows you to get value across multiple channels. It's not just content for social or content that just sits on your site and you're all dressed up with nowhere to go.
Right.
It's important to curate across all of those channels to be consistent across those channels as well.
Right. I mean, the thing is that people are going to go to your website and they are going to look at your blog and they are going to see when things were published. They're going to see when you're active, especially in times like this. I'm sure your economist hat is on, where we're not sure if a restaurant is in business anymore.
Right.
We really don't know. You go look at their Instagram, they haven't posted for a year.
Right.
I don't know. I better call when I see them on Google My Business.
Yeah. Or even, as you know, in generationally right now, many consumers are overweighting the emotional connection with a brand and whether that brand aligns with the causes that I care about, even more so than the quality or color or style of the product or service that I'm receiving. And I'm not, as a brand, going to often be able to authentically write consistently about the causes or the emotional appeal. But if I can curate from a nonprofit or an organization that our company feels strongly about, it's much easier than to make that emotional connection with my target customer who also feels strongly about World Wildlife Foundation or some other organization. But I can't necessarily write about, as a manufacturing company, the potential extinction of pandas. And I'm totally making that up, right? Because I have no credibility to write about that.
Right.
Topic. But I have a lot of credibility to read and then use that to share about that topic. And so those are areas as well where curation can be the only right solution, not rewriting that type of content.
Right. And if you're an auto mechanic shop, curating from Edmunds and Car and Driver and even vehicle manufacturers and their
Absolutely.
blogs.
Or even community news, right? This event's happening. These restaurants are opening up,
Right.
This is the neighborhood we're in. We love our fellow small businesses. We want to support them, right? As you said, scratching one back only comes beneficial back to you. So this neighbor down the street, they're having a sale. I'm going to share their content as well. I'm all part of this ecosystem, and people will notice that it's not just all about you all the time, because no one wants to see how many oil change promos you have consistently, right?
No,
it has to be a piece of that.
I think of that because the Goodyear tire shop by me is doing that. I already got my oil changed.
Yeah.
It's not time.
What else you got? Yeah.
Maybe ask me to come in to get my tires aligned.
Yeah.
Or something. I mean, my wheels aligned and my pressure checked.
Right.
So how does it work? I didn't set up our automation. But I'm just curious, and I'm sure the audience is as well. Can you, what are the available websites? What if I have the San Antonio Register here or report, SAreport.com. What if I wanted to start highlighting SAreport.com on BridgetWiller.com? Can I just type that in, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we tend to recommend starting by the content that you're interested in more so than sources, which is a little different than many of the other tools that are out there. That being said, you can certainly focus on San Antonio, dining, events, community, nonprofit, donations, charity.
So that would be the topic.
That would be your topic, right? And then I'm not only going to get content from the local San Antonio publishers, but I'm going to get articles from maybe the Dallas as a Morning Herald, I believe, or something like that. Yeah. Also wrote an article about what's happening in San Antonio. And that's maybe the article that my local San Antonio market has not yet seen or read. Right. And so then it's wow, Bridget not only reads all the stuff that we all read, but she's reading stuff that's talking about us that I never would have seen, or Phoenix is writing about San Antonio now, right? And so being able to share that content as well. That being said, you do have the opportunity to remove publications that you do not wish to see. You mentioned
Yeah.
BBC, for
Yeah.
example. You can also add full sources in there for curation, right? So if there is, I want to see everything that Kaiser Permanente writes because I'm in healthcare and they're a great leader, and I don't really care what it's talking about because I need to
Right.
know that they wrote about it. I can pull in everything from that publisher as well. So you have all of that at your fingertips. And then it's all in one system. So you can just say, yeah, this is good. That one's not good. This one goes to email. That one goes to social, and you're done. And I do most of it. We also use everything that we talk about because we want to make sure it still works.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be recommending it. I mostly do that activity on my phone, probably in about an hour, right? Friday afternoons or Monday mornings to find the articles that we think are valuable.
Yeah.
And the other important piece is that, as you know, you can tap into the whole team. So it doesn't have to just rest on the shoulders of one person who then needs to be an expert in everything that you do as an
Right.
organization. Get the person who owns the company. Maybe they're involved and can star a few things. That's all we have to ask them to do.
Right.
Person who's actually doing customer success. They'll know a lot about what customers care about. Give them an account to get in and just approve stuff. You're not asking them to do a lot of work, but then you as the communications person are actually able to hone in on the universal perspective of the organization and showcase that as the brand
Right.
versus like, this is just what Scott thinks, but I'm going to hide behind the brand logo and share it as the brand. But it's really just me.
Right.
People notice that too.
And that matters. Like, for example, when I'm doing this on Twitter for a client account, I make a list of all of the employees of that company because I want to know what they're thinking, because that helps me do a better job with what I'm doing, writing or whatever.
Yes.
I mean, this has been a really great conversation. I want to ask you one more question.
Great.
Where do you see the future of content going?
There was an interesting quote, and we're hearing it over and over again. We do a lot around social selling use cases, employee advocacy use cases. And we've heard, I don't care where the article comes from or where the content comes from, as long as it's good. And so I think there's going to be this continued blurring and breaking down of these silos versus from original versus curated versus syndicated versus licensed. And it's just going to be find the content that delivers the message best, right? And if I can find an article that delivers that message best that somebody else wrote, I'm going to use that. In a lot of cases, that perspective doesn't exist, and therefore I need to be the one to write it. And so I don't just default writing it. We're seeing some of that shift. I think we're going to see far more of a pendulum shift as sales teams now get more involved in the content mix for marketing.
Yeah.
And HR teams get more involved in the content mix. Those are going to be new and unique perspectives where it's not just a writing forward mentality, but a message forward mentality. And they're going to bring those balls of clay to the marketing and comms team. And it's going to be a unique skill set of the marketing group to change those balls of clay and ideas into a message that can be well communicated externally. So the marketing group is not going to change in their authority. They're probably going to get a higher position in that table discussion and be able to still do that in a way that is more supportive to sales versus combative to sales, right? In that discussion. So that's where I think content is going, is more of a supporting role to the people who are delivering versus being always delivered by the brand and then the people resharing.
Right. I love that because I always see content as a tool, as a tool for the sales team, an internal library, if not people finding it something that they can use. So I like that collaborative viewpoint. And I think that if people approached it that way, there'd be more buy-in from a marketing team anyway.
Entirely. And what's great about small businesses is in many cases, it's the same person. So you're already collaborating. Just think about it in that context.
Yeah, but you're also making it possible for you to delegate and then focus your skill set on something that earns revenue.
Yes.
That's
comparative advantage.
Business. Yes, comparative advantage.
Yeah.
This episode was brought to you by macroeconomics. Thanks, Scott, so much. Like, wow.
Thank you.
This was a great conversation. I have a lot to think about. I know our viewers are going to have a lot to think about. And I hope you all go check out upcontent.com. Twitter is Get Up Content.
That's correct.
Twitter is Get Up Content.
Get Up
And
Content.
go follow them. Tell them you saw this episode and say hi to Scott. But
Awesome.
for now,
Look forward to chatting with you.
we're going to say goodbye. So bye. Thanks for watching.